Hey folks, welcome back to Gaming Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course stream for fun. Today we're taking a look at Digital Foundry. This is a group that looks at a lot of technical specs for hardware, PC and console. It's all usually related to gaming and everything. And they've done a really good job of actually keeping up with the Ps5 Pro. And this time they were actually able to get some hands-on time with 11 separate games, which is wonderful. And it's about an hour or maybe a little over an hour. I'll link this down below for you guys so you guys can actually watch it yourself if you wish. But I'll go over each individual game as a summary of what the PS5 Pro is doing and how the devs have utilized it to better their game. And some are better than others, but each game does have an improvement. And then I'll just kind of give my thoughts of the Pro revised after all this. So thanks for tuning in, folks. You can always find me at Gaming Garbage 22 on YouTube if you wish, and then also on Discord, Twitter X, and Twitch. Twitch, you can watch it there first, unedited. It just is what it is. YouTube isn't edited much either, but it's a little bit of a nicer presentation, just slightly. But anyway, let's go ahead and dig into this. So this was a special event that Digital Foundry was actually invited to. They took some time to send someone over there. They had to fly him out there to actually get some hands-on time. And it was really cool because they actually got to play with some hands-on with most of the games. I got to feel, too, that some of the games they just got to watch, not necessarily play themselves. They also were able to get some B-roll from Sony to be able to use in their editing and do side-by-side comparisons for their entire video for each game that they tried. So yeah, it was actually really nice. All of these PS5 Pros were on dev kits, so not the actually true like version 1.1 or 1.0. These were on dev kits, but these are really, really close to the actual thing, so that devs have an idea about what they're working with. But there could still be some slight improvements with the PS5 Pro when it actually releases. So the first one we got to see was Formula 1 24. This is made by Codemasters. We got a quality mode that was 4K at 60 frames, or really, really close. And they had 3 ray tracing effects. They had global diffusion, ray tracing, RTO, and RTO reflections, which is ray tracing stuff. And these effects were given a wonderful sense of realism to the scene. They also had an 8K mode, which was restructured using native TAAU, not PSSR, which I thought was interesting. So these companies, they can utilize the native hardware benefits of the Pro that it is given, which is a little bit more in RAM. It's got a boost mode for the CPU, which I'm not sure if the dev kits actually have this or not. They were able to unconfirm that as well. But yeah, some companies actually choose to not use PSSR, though most of them do so far with these 11 games. But too, there's just the utilization of the hardware itself and not using some of the software. With the 8K mode, this will be locked at 30 frames per second. You're going to lose the some or most of the ray tracing benefits in replay and gameplay. There also is a performance mode. You need to make sure, of course, you have an HDMI 1.0, which you will. The Pro will be shipped with this, just like the PS5 is and the Series X. You'll be able to get 4K at 120 hertz, which is really freaking good. This is also using TAAU, which is the old way of rendering stuff with the original PS5. And so, yeah, looking into PSSR on how to implement, that software in the future. Right now, they don't know enough about it, so they don't feel comfortable really using it. And they want to make sure they're using it effectively and giving the best performance they possibly can. The video itself and the comparison both still look really good, but like when the track is wet or there's like a sunrise or sunset or something on the track, it really makes it look pretty amazing. just with what I can see on YouTube. And even just looking through YouTube, which is imperfect window to view through, you can still see some of the difference, and that is really cool. Yeah, it was it was honestly probably the better looking ones, and I feel like too the ray tracing does a wonderful job with reflections. Does a wonderful job with refracting the light, like in water and stuff. And this isn't just necessarily on the track. This is also a little bit like off the track too. So they really go kind of like your entire visual field has ray tracing reflections and refractions and stuff kind of going all over the place to try to give you an immersive feel as possible. Next, we got to see Gran Turismo 7, which is polyphony digital. The ray tracing mode uses PSSR. The resolution is slightly less because of this. This is 1440p instead of 2160, so this is not a native 4K resolution. It's close. Most people probably can't tell. I probably wouldn't really be able to tell either. This is definitely better than 1080p. But you could think of 1440 as like a 2K. You could kind of think of it like that. The ray tracing is limited to the vehicles, maybe some in track, but out of the track, there's really no ray tracing really at all. It's just kept to the track and the vehicles themselves. That was probably the biggest benefit that we got to see was the actual reflections of other vehicles in the paint and in the gloss of another vehicle. So side by side, you can actually see the reflection of colors and shapes and stuff a little bit like you would in real life, of course. It's still not like perfect. It's not like a perfect gloss. It's kind of blurry a little bit, but you can definitely tell that there's like reflections of other vehicles and stuff on the track while you're racing. The replays too are also at a lower resolution. These are about 1200 pixels or 1200p. And what I appreciate about the guy that they sent is that he's actually counting all of the pixels in a certain area or parameters so that he can actually get the true resolution of what's being presented on the screen. And I thought it was really cool that he actually took the time to do that, because I wouldn't want to count all of those pixels. Even if it's just 1,000 of them, that would be pretty insane, or like a couple of hundred. But yeah, he's taking the time to count and recount and make sure that he's getting those counts right. The frame rate is targeted at 60, but there's a few moments or a few areas where that's dropping. Doesn't quite hit that. He said in most cases it's hitting like high 40s, low to mid 50s. The image quality mode that they have as well, if you wish to choose this, is 8K targeted at 60, and also again like 4K at 60. That's really their target, is 4K at 60, but they do allow you to have like an 8K mode. The 8K removes ray tracing so that it can try to still target that 60 frames per second while you're racing. And so, like, you still have the original ray tracing stuff, but the ray tracing that they're adding, all of these guys that they're adding to their games is like ray tracing 2.0. And so it's not like all ray tracing is removed from the game. It's just the improvement or the enhancement of ray tracing is missing. I just want to make sure that's clear. And that type of improvement is only with the Pro and probably coming the next-gen consoles in a few years. Next, we got to see Horizon Forbidden West. This is by Guerrilla Games. The Pro does very well at 4K at 60 frames per second. This is a performance mode, and it really is hitting those 60 frames per second. With this game almost being 10 years old now, it was definitely limited by the time a little bit with how graphically amazing it could be at launch. And now that we have a better system, more tools to work with, the devs are able to actually make this look really flippin' good. And they also do the side-by-side comparisons of the performance and the quality mode, and then the Pro enhancement. And it does look pretty freaking amazing. You're getting that really good resolution and texture there, along with, getting really close to like 50, 60 frames per second for your gameplay. And even when you see the quality mode, it's really got a lot of frame rate drop in there with some of the stuff that they're showing. But yeah, the Pro mode, it's got like the best of both worlds. It's still kind of a little blurry in some areas. It's not perfect. It's not like crystal clear, sharp, but it's still pretty dang good. The quality mode does a true 4K at the highest frame rate possible in the scene, so you're going to have more fluctuations there with 60 frames per second. The developers, they didn't want to take away choice from the player, which I think is a really cool mindset. So they're maintaining the quality and their performance mode there. They think people should play on their performance mode to get those 60 frames or maintain as close to that as possible. They really wanted to be able to do that, but they also do have the quality mode too for like a more true 4K experience. They also had much further draw distance for shadows. They were really able to expand the volume of this in the open world and stuff, and have those shadows engage much further away and keep that sense of realism through trees and mountains and the sunsets and stuff. But there's still like blurriness too on the edges as you get further away. Close up, the shadows look extremely good with what's being used. I think these guys too also used. Actually, no, I don't think these guys did use PSSR. But it wasn't checkerboarding either. And so they couldn't necessarily get a direct, straight answer of what Guerrilla Games was doing. But Guerrilla Games showed the biggest improvement out of any other game in the showcase. And so, yeah, they worked some magic somewhere to actually make it look really, really good. There was still, of course, some blurriness still. But like it did look really good, and it kind of reminded me, looking at some of the visuals for the Pro edition or the Pro version, it kind of reminded me of like Hellblade 2 with the blurriness, with the chromatic filter and stuff. But it definitely was not as heavy. But still, yeah, there was just kind of blurriness in the image, kind of smoothing things out, maybe providing a little less work in some graphical features than others, but overall, like sitting back playing the game, it looks really flippin' good, I gotta say. Next was Hogwarts Legacy. This is by Avalanche Studios. Large focus was shadows with ray tracing using PSSR. The fidelity mode is focused at 30 frames per second. This is basically where it's capped, and even I think sometimes in some scenes you're still not going to be hitting quite 30 frames, probably pretty close, but you'll be getting that 25 to 30 frames per second. There's realistic changes and adjustments from light sources as they move. They really mention specifically in caves when you really only have like one light source or one primary light source. And as that's moving, the realism of shadow shift and how it's interacting around in the curvature of different objects or water or whatever really did look really good. And even kind of the realism of the blurriness or the definition of shadows, of how far away a light source is compared to close, was also just done really, really well. So Hogwarts Legacy developers really wanted to focus on shadow creation and realism and creating that effect and focusing on the contrast. And yeah, in person, it did look. They did mention in person that it did look a lot better to see it on the screen rather than through the Sony showcase that they did. And again, they did side-by-side comparisons too. In some aspects, you could see differences, but definitely like reflections and stuff off of like marble or certain gloss textures. And the definition of these reflections was really good. I mean, it was like you're almost looking at the real thing. It is pretty impressive. There also is a performance mode that uses some of the old fidelity mode settings for the PS5 base, and then they're using PSSR to raise that frame rate to get closer to 60. Again, you're not at 60, but it's to get you closer to that. There's also improved ray tracing, and yeah, again, those very accurate reflections. Excuse me. Next, we got to see Spider-Man 2. This is by Insomniac Games. And The resolutions are actually the same. So we're looking at 1150p between the base and the Pro edition. It doesn't matter which. It's the exact same resolution, which I thought was pretty kind of crazy, actually. The performance with the PS5 base and Pro, um, the Pro is definitely higher frame rate. And so you're able to see that as Spider-Man is swinging in between buildings and moving around stuff, and the car is whipping by as he's getting close to the street and stuff. There's also better shadows, and the shadows are also further away in the city landscape, which is nice using PSSR. The close-up visuals looked a little better on the base than PSSR. Because it's how PSSR is rendering everything, and with the fast movement, it's almost like it's having a hard time rendering quick enough the entire scene up close, and so it looked, according to their eye, it looked a little worse actually on the Pro up close than with the native TAAU on the base. And so yeah, it's not like it's worse necessarily, but that it is, designed and that the graphics are a little different. But most people seeing this or can tell will probably actually see this as like a worsening of the image quality. Kind of more blurry. For some of the scenes too, or again for some of the movement, like the PSSR can't actually keep up for some scenes. And then aliasing we had, they were able to see some kind of tearing and aliasing in the picture, and so there wasn't like smooth transitions there between frames. There's didn't seem to be a lot of ray tracing shadows necessarily, like improvements in ray tracing, just using more of the software and hardware improvements with the Pro to get the shadows, further away, more realistic, further away, and more of them, and creating a kind of more overall realistic and immersive environment. They are thinking of how to use them better in the future and use PSSR as a future feature and continue to learn and improve with it. So, yeah, I kind of got the sense that they weren't necessarily happy with Spider-Man 2, with what they were able to do so far with this patch that's coming at launch. But they're going to continue to work on it, and I think certainly optimization is something they're going to be looking at, or maybe finding a different way to kind of get things. Because again, like the PSSR, the graphical change and changes in shadows, especially close up, you can tell like something is just kind of amiss there. And again, it's not super noticeable. I don't even know if everybody can tell. I had a hard time telling, but like being able to see the light cast on cars on the road as they're traveling while Spider-Man is swinging, it looked like, yeah, they just looked a little off. It's kind of hard to describe exactly. Again, link in the description below if you actually want to watch it yourself. Next, we got to see Ratchet and Clank. This is also by Insomniac. PSSR is doing a better job than the base PS5. Probably because of the slower movement in the game compared to Spider-Man 2. Again, that is a very fast-paced game in most cases. We're also not getting like overly defined look to edges. They're keeping it kind of a more native feel. They're not trying to enhance the contrast of edges in the game. We're also getting a better resolution at 1440p. So again, it's kind of like that 2K image. And then quite the graphical upgrade, honestly, in the presentation. So again, it's hard to see during the Cerny presentation when they announced the Pro. But, in person, you can actually see a pretty good difference. And I'd even say you could see a pretty good difference in some cases during even Digital Foundry's presentation, too, of what they were able to capture with Ratchet and Clank. But yeah, it drastically improves ghosting. So, like, they used an example of confetti falling during the parade. And that confetti kind of ghosts behind itself a little bit. It's not like a clear cut, very defined confetti frame by frame as it falls. So there's some ghosting there, but the PSSR and the improvements with the Pro, it's able to like virtually remove that ghosting issue and completely get rid of it. So it does a really good job rendering. Again, that's not super fast paced, and it's able to keep up. And I think that maybe that's one of the limitations that we're starting to actually see with some of these games that are having these improvements with the Pro, is that if the movement is fast enough in the game, PSSR is actually going to have a hard time keeping up. And so for faster paced games in open worlds or bigger areas where there's a lot going on already, companies are going to have to figure out how to better utilize or optimize PSSR to get some of those like better improvements for shadows and lighting and all of that. Next, we got to see The Last of Us Part 2 remastered. So this is not Last of Us Part 2 original. This is the remaster itself. This is by Naughty Dog. The Pro mode focused on trying to get to that 60 frames per second. Again, it's not always going to be hitting that, but it'll be fairly close. There was also some breaking of the picture during some of the scenes and transitions. It wasn't quite smooth. I would say it was pretty good overall, but yeah, it wasn't quite smooth. Also, using PSSR, they're able to get a 1440p resolution. There's a lot of sharpness in the detail. There's a lot of stuff in the background that pops or is easier to see or read. And then we're also looking at it looks pretty good at 4K actually. So again, that 4K, that improvement, it's going to help with the background. The foreground isn't really going to improve or change very much. It's just that background detail that we're going to see. And then mixed in with the, kind of improvement of shadows and stuff. It's looking pretty good. But yeah, their Pro mode was really focused on getting that 60 frames, and then trying to get maintain a better resolution at 1440p. Again, that 2K kind of level of resolution there, and just improving the detail and trying to get the whole scene to look better. So they took time to look at ferns, which, is very boring, but you're drastically able to tell the difference between the base modes for PS5 and then the Pro itself, and pretty big difference. You're not, you don't feel like you necessarily need glasses, and so even up pretty close in some scenes, you're able to tell a big improvement with, again, the grass and the structure and vines and lighting, and just things look more detailed through the entire scene. But especially in the background, there's really big improvements there. PSSR looks great, but when it gets taxed, it's a little bit too much to process. So again, we were seeing some of that picture breaking and some fracturing of the scene there and transition between frames. So yeah, it really kind of depends what's going on, but still, even though some of these games are pretty old, and this is even a remastered version, I think it's really pretty insane that still the Pro is having a hard time keeping up. Part of it too is going to be this optimization with studios of learning how to use these new tools, and again, they're just working on dev kits. I'm sure these studios are going to be buying a Pro or have already ordered one themselves. And so they're going to be doing more stuff with the actual thing to see what they can work with and what they're capable of. But again, yeah, studios are just getting their feet wet. And I think to fully utilize for current and next titles, these studios are going to need probably maybe a year or maybe a couple of years, and also see what other studios are doing. And what I think is kind of crazy is, and I'll get more into this toward the end as I talk about my overall thoughts with the Pro, is that they're going to have to take time to really optimize fully what the Pro offers, and then by that time we're already going to be talking about the next gen console. And yeah, again, this is part of the value proposition. It's like, if you can still get a PS5 Pro pre-order, by the way, from PlayStation Direct, so you don't have to pay the scalper price if you don't want to. Still, you can still order one. But I don't think the Pro is going to be fully utilized. We'll have to see. Again, it comes down to the studio. It comes down to the talent there. And it comes down to really what they want to focus on, and how they want to utilize those tools. for their game. Next, we got to see Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is by Square Enix. There's only going to be a performance mode, which is really targeting as high a resolution they can, close to 4K at 60 frames. And the cutscenes see a huge improvement in detail. Dude, it's like you can literally reach out and touch. Oh man, it is crazy. Like, it's the highest level of fidelity I've ever seen in a cutscene. It just looks really unreal. I'm serious. It's crazy. If anything, you should at least watch Digital Foundry's just for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It looks crazy, man. It's mind-blowing. So there's still some image stability issues, but this could be with LOD, which, again, I'll be honest, I don't even know what that is, but it's a different kind of rendering thing with putting graphics on the screen. And then also, too, it could also be an issue, again, with PSSR. Again, it's just that it can't keep up. It's not necessarily what I would call fast-paced for a game, because you can just kind of jog around and stuff, but there is also a lot to render. So there's trees and bushes and grass and flowers, and there's the reflections of everything, and the mountainscape in the background, and clouds and crap. And, I mean, there's just all of this stuff that it's got to work on rendering, and it might just be having a hard time keeping up. So, again, the Pro is being taxed in these open areas. And the camera movement, too, can be a little too fast for it to keep up in those scenes. Again, they're not necessarily fast-paced scenes like Spider-Man 2, but now we have open areas instead of actually swinging in between buildings. And so there's more to render and there's more to compute and deal with. And it's still struggling. So I just think that's interesting. Compared to the Pro comparing the base model versus the Pro, the Pro has a very big advantage in the game. There's huge improvements there. Again, the detail, the resolution, working toward those 60 frames, the cutscenes, it's all improved. It's all doing a wonderful job. Next, we get to see Crew Motorfest and Demon Souls and Dragon's Dogma. I got the sense that they weren't able to actually play these, so they kind of lumped these together toward the end, but they were at least able to watch these. And so, again, the target is 60 frames per second. For Motorfest, there's a big focus on ray tracing reflections, excuse me, and also detail of the environment through the city structure or whatever that you're driving through and the areas you're driving through. There's a better focus on detail there, for reading signs or seeing some of the detail or, again, the sunset and sunrise and stuff. It is definitely improved, but there's also some tearing while you're playing too. So again, the transition between frames is not always great. Again, it kind of depends on what you're doing or what's going on in the scene. So yeah, that's kind of a bummer. Demon Souls, really good improvement on shadows. So they focused on improving the shadows and lighting. That was their big focus. I do want to note that the gameplay for Demon Souls focused on an area that was smaller, tighter, and would be a less demanding area in the game. We didn't get to see a big wide open area, kind of like we did in Final Fantasy VII. So I thought that was interesting. That's going to make it look better maybe than it really is. But again, that's just what they wanted to show. So but yeah, better detail. The fire looks really, really good in the scene. Again, they're really playing with the lighting and the shadows to try to make that more realistic, to make the shadows a little more defined close up and better looking further away, and again, more of them. So a lot of companies are actually focusing on this and really pushing that ray tracing to push it as hard as they can. Next, we got to see Dragon's Dogma, so a lot more stable frame rate, which is nice. For a lot of us that know, frame rate was all over the place, especially on PC. People were getting like 30 all the way to 70 or 75 and back again, depending on camera movement and what the scene was and stuff. And so it was really jarring for a lot of people, and it'd be frustrating too during combat. But, the city was the worst in the game. But this time, with the Pro enhancement, we actually got pretty much around 50 frames per second in the city, which is amazing. Because, again, this was the most graphically demanding place for a lot of people. They're getting like 25. They're getting kind of 30, but again, it's jumping around. It's not smooth. So yeah, this was a huge improvement for the game. And so yeah, you're getting much better frame rate. Combat's going to be more fun to engage with. You're not going to be snapped out of that immersion while you're playing. Yeah, it looks pretty good. But again, it's not a massive focus on shadows and better ray tracing. Maybe a little bit in there, but again, they were really just focused on that frame rate for their game because that was their biggest complaint. And I think that's great that a lot of these companies are focusing on how they can improve their game the best or better utilize these tools for their game. And this is their first one, so these studios are going to get better with time. But again, it's like I don't really know if they're going to have a lot of time to really utilize the Pro in probably the last 3-4 years that we have before we have a next gen console. And yeah, I think that's going to be kind of challenging because again, it's like $700 for a console you're going to be able to use 3-4 more years before you're going to go out and buy the next gen console anyway. And if I had to choose personally, I would rather just buy the next gen console instead of the refresh every time. Some people have the money to do both, and we're not knocking anybody there. But for a lot of us, it's just a lot of money now to try to buy both because we're buying the base console, that's $500. We're buying the Pro now at $700. That's $1,200 right there. There's still services. There's still other peripherals and accessories. It's just getting really expensive. You can trade in or you can sell your PS5 Pro to somebody else, $200-$300. You can get something out of it, which is nice, but I'm really seeing cheaper prices already for the PS5 Pro, regardless of whether it's trade-in value somewhere or selling on Facebook Market or eBay. Some people are still trying to get that higher price, but I think as we get closer and when the Pro actually launches, I think naturally the market is going to decide that, yeah, the price needs to be lower because more people aren't going to want to pay the $700. They'd rather pay $500 or $400, whatever they can get for it. So my overall thoughts, as I've already shared a little bit, but yeah, Digital Foundry's thoughts I wanted to go over first. Who is this for was the question. The biggest benefiter would be those looking to get closer or getting content at 60 frames per second for a lot of the current titles, especially the older titles like Ratchet & Clank and Horizon Zero Dawn. They're basically going to hit that 60 frames per second. There's large jumps in frame rate with Horizon, Dragon's Dogma 2, and Ratchet & Clank. These games are really going to benefit from the Pro and the enhancement and the extra power that they get to work through for the console. Those wanting better shadows and ray tracing and detail, Final Fantasy VII, Formula 1, Hogwarts Legacy, and The Last of Us Part 2 Remaster are all drastically benefiting from this, but not necessarily both. And so it's like you kind of have to choose what you're really wanting to go for. What I appreciate with Square Enix with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is that they are pushing as far as they can with ray tracing and shadows while staying as close as they can to that 60 frame. And so they really wanted to focus on 60 frame first and then have ray tracing after that. And I think a lot of the studios, again, are trying to do both, but some are pushing more toward ray tracing and others are pushing more toward frame rate. So again, I just think it's interesting how we're seeing the dynamic and the shift between each individual studio making the decision for us on what's more important. And again, it's not like you're going to get this particular same benefit across the board. It's going to be individual case by studio and game on what they're focusing on and what they think is best for the player. So it's not going to be the same experience for every game on the Pro. It's going to shift and change and alter. There's going to be different modes, like Final Fantasy VII just has one mode, and others have 3. And some even do 8K. And so, yeah, it's just interesting to see what they're doing. But my personal thoughts is, we're still not hitting 4K. We're still not hitting 2160. We're hitting all the way down to 1150, like Spider-Man 2, and we're hitting all the way up to around 1550, which I think was for Formula 1. I think I forgot to mention that. Yeah, but we're still not getting 4K games. Now, there's probably some upscaling happening there, but if these resolutions were actually pushed to 4K, they wouldn't be able to do all of the ray tracing, the additional shadows, pushing the frame rate. You know what I mean? So, like, we still have a console, we still have a Pro that can't do 4K at 60 frames. Um, and so I don't know what people are paying for. And the fact that, like, Spider-Man 2 is the same resolution as the base model is astounding to me. Like, there's actually no improvement there. Again, can people tell? I don't know. Because you're still having a lower resolution, more like a 2K image, or maybe a little less image natively being presented on the screen, but in a 4K overlay already, because your TV is going to try to, it's going to naturally push out that 4K image anyway. It's like having a blurry image and you're putting a clear filter over it, and the TV is natively already going to do that for you. A lot of TVs also, once you start getting into actual microchips and stuff in the TV, which is just kind of crazy to me, excuse me, they're going to be pushing and making those 4K resolutions anyway. So maybe that's what some of these studios are thinking of, knowing they can get away with lower resolution and then have more power to push shadows and ray tracing and reflections and pushing all of this other stuff that does make a game look pretty good, I gotta say, like in Hogwarts Legacy or like in Final Fantasy VII. But yeah, I'm just still astounded. Like, we actually have worse resolution than what the PS4 Pro had and what the One X had, which was the previous refresh. And again, we're looking like 10 years ago. And that's just kind of astounding to me. A really big focus too, with all of these companies, is ray tracing and shadows. To benefit from that, to push the more immersion in the game, to make it look more realistic. Also, the reflecting and refracting off of surfaces and water and all of that stuff. I would love to see like even this game with just light refraction through water in the ocean. Um, all of these games are above water, so I'd love to see an actual game that's in the ocean space, and this already looks good on the screen. Seeing how the shadows are shifting and moving, between the density of water up on the surface with the waves and swells and stuff close to the shallows or the reef. You're still seeing that change, and it still looks pretty good. If you take some time to look at it and watch, it's smooth, it's clear, it looks good, and then it's like this is a whole new level on top of that. But again, rendering all of the shadows and changes constantly with, if you're in water, like scuba diving or something, or even playing Another Crab's Treasure, that is going to be very graphically demanding. And I don't know if we're ever going to see that on a video game that's in water, because it might just be too much for the Pro. And it's just not going to be worth the dev's time. And it's also going to make the Pro look bad. So, again, companies are, I'm sure, going to be incentivized to not actually make the Pro look bad if they can help it. But yeah, I would love to see some underwater stuff on the Pro. I think that'd be really interesting. But yeah, again, we're pushing all this ray tracing and shadows and, that type of benefit for this immersion, while getting closer, if they can, to 60 frames, or getting as close as they can. A lot of these, each studio too, they have to decide how to use the hardware and use the software, like PSSR. And as they continue to learn, as they continue to kind of mess around and play around with different things, they're going to figure out different stuff. And, things should improve over time. The thing that I thought was interesting was Formula One actually looks the best, with getting the 4K, the ray tracing, and, like the 60 frames are getting really close to it. I think it's crazy that they're able to get each one to an extent, but they also had different modes too. So again, they had a performance mode and they had a quality mode, where they're focusing on different aspects. But getting 4K at 120, That's pretty crazy. But I thought the game developer that did the best was Codemasters with Formula One, and they didn't use PSSR. And so maybe PSSR isn't actually as big of a benefit as maybe we think it is, or as Sony thought it was, because they're doing something else and they're just using the raw additional computing power. Apparently, um, I was incorrect on the Pro. Again, I really want to see a real test of the PS5 Pro itself, but apparently this thing doesn't have just like 1720 teraflops compared to the 11 that the base model has. This has 33 teraflops. So we're talking about like a 300% increase, and that's huge. That's a lot of extra graphical power. We're also going to be having a boost mode, which we can't actually try that yet because, again, this is all on dev kits. Dev kits are not going to have that. But yeah, it's just like there is some big push for improvement there, but I just thought the company that did best didn't even use PSSR. So yeah, that's just kind of weird. Like we got to try to figure that out of exactly why that's the case, because this is supposed to be a huge benefit to the developers, but maybe they're just not quite using it correctly or utilizing it well. I don't know. We'll have to see exactly what's going on, but I'm just kind of surprised by that. One of the biggest things they were pushing during the presentation. It's maybe not as great as they thought. Let's see. Each game will be different. Each studio is going to focus on what they want to push, whether it's shadows, whether it's frame rate, whether it's something else, or a mixture of all. Some, again, are providing different modes that people can choose between, and others are just saying, look, we're just doing one particular mode, and that's it. People aren't going to be able to choose on their Pro. Older titles benefit the most for a cleaner and sharper image and detail. And run a lot better. The newer titles, they benefit most with frame rate. Like Dragon's Dogma, running through that city, man, at 25 frames sucks. Or even worse than that. Like, we don't want to be seeing that. But being able to go through the city at high 40s, low 50s, that's pretty good. That is a massive increase there and huge benefit. Driving games, too, they're going to benefit the most from ray tracing. And some other games like Hogwarts Legacy. They look really good. The shadows and the lighting and just how all of that is transpired and pushed onto the screen and stuff just really looks good. Oh yeah, I did mention already we didn't have CPU boost yet, so we're not able to test that. I do want to emphasize, too, with the CPU boost, is that the start of your session is going to look better than the end of your session. And this is because the CPU is actually going to heat up along with everything else. And we don't really know if they've improved the cooling in the Pro model. I hope they have. Because we supposedly have an extra 1.5, 2 gigs of RAM in there, GDR6. And then we're also pushing that GPU. And for all of us that have CPs or have played around with them, or PCs, excuse me, saying that backwards. For all of us that have personal computers, we know those GPUs really freaking heat up along with the CPUs too. And so if we don't have improved cooling and we have long game sessions for some people, which some will, I do worry about the heatsink being able to do its job. And the airflow getting to push out that heat of the Pro so that it doesn't overheat. So my suggestion is to figure out the best aerodynamics for your system and leave it in that position. Or start playing in that position. Whether it's vertical or better horizontal, I don't know. I don't own one. I can't test any of this. I kind of wish I could, but yeah. Cooling is going to be really important, and we don't have any data whatsoever on if cooling is better on the Pro. And if it's not better, that might be really bad for people. So you might have a paperweight at the end of the day after playing. I hope not. Even just running a game like Star Trucker on my game, which is an indie game, is not really high graphics or definition or anything. Even just running that on my Series X, I am pushing the heat out of that at 115, 116 degrees Fahrenheit. which is hot. That's like a really hot summer day, 115 degrees, and we're having additional RAM. We're got this boost mode for the CPU. We're got this bigger graphics card using more juice, and we are creating more heat in the Pro. And gal, I do worry, but I know I'm rambling, but yeah, I hope they figure that out. I hope it's not a problem. And then two, just my last point is that PSSR isn't efficient yet. Again, the best game that on the screen between the others in its category was Formula One, and they didn't even use PSSR. They did something else, and it looks amazing. And they were able to do a performance mode and a quality mode, and their performance mode is pushing 4K at 120 frames, which is crazy. The other games aren't doing this. They also have ray tracing in the game, and then they're also pushing the shadows and they also had the highest resolution out of any other game. They had 1550 or around there. So yeah, a little bit better than 2K. They were pushing everything really good. Somebody either figured out something or just found out that PSR is just not as great. And this brings up the question too: can Sony actually patch PSSR and some of these other software tools for the Pro? Or is it just as is? Because if devs are finding out that PSSR really isn't that great, or is actually really taxing, even with the added hardware benefits that the Pro has, maybe it's not worth using. And so we just have a dead tool, maybe after another year or a couple of years, that companies maybe aren't going to utilize. And again, the optics around that aren't great. Doesn't look good. So thanks for tuning in, folks. You can always follow me at GamingGarbage22 over at YouTube. Also on Discord, Twitter X, and Twitch. Twitch, you get to watch it there first. Free, all that good stuff. And really take time, if you're interested yourself, to see the visual comparisons. Take a look at the description below for the link for Digital Foundry's take, which is where I got all of this information, because it is a really good presentation. It is kind of long. It's like an hour and 10 minutes. But if you're thinking or on the fence of getting a Pro, take a look at it. It's going to help you decide. So hopefully you guys are doing well. Excuse me. I want to put this out here too. For our hurricane victims, we do have another hurricane coming. And so we have Milton on its way. It's going to hit over the middle section of Florida, maybe travel up the coast a little bit and swing north, go along maybe the other side now of the Carolinas. We'll have to see as it gets here, but yeah, this is going to be showing up in a few days. So yeah, just prepare. Maybe go travel somewhere, small vacation. I don't know, but yeah, just prepare in the best way you think is possible, and just be ready for it. And there's still a lot of mess and damage going on from the last one from Helen. So yeah, just be careful out there, folks. I'll see you guys on the next one.